A story from a girl's perspective. The rain started suddenly, the way it often does in late October. Heavy, thick drops lashed against the asphalt, turning it into a black mirror that reflected the trembling lights of street lamps and neon signs. I was huddled under the awning of the Centaur bar, trying to wrap my thin autumn coat tighter around myself. It was useless against the damp wind that cut right through to my bones. I should have dressed warmer. I'd seen the forecast this morning. The last customers had left half an hour ago, leaving behind the stale smell of beer, cigarette smoke, and cheap cologne. I had wiped down the tables, stacked the chairs, and counted the night's tips under the weary supervision of the bartender, Vasily. Now that my shift was over, the exhaustion hit me. That special kind of bone-tired weariness that settles in after a 12-hour shift on your feet. "Go home already, Yulia. What are you waiting for?" Vasily called out as he locked the door. "Your guy picking you up? It's pouring out there." "He was supposed to," I muttered instinctively, pulling out my phone. The screen stayed black, no matter how many times I jabbed the power button. Damn it. The battery had died right after lunch, and in the chaos of the dinner rush, I'd completely forgotten to charge it. So now here I was. No way to call anyone. No way to order a cab through an app. Andre's text had come through that afternoon when my phone still had a pulse. "Emergency work trip to St. Petersburg. 3 days. Can't pick you up. Take a taxi, I'll send you money." Sweet words, but they didn't help me now. Almost midnight. A deserted street on the edge of the city. A good 40-minute drive home. Buses ran once an hour. If they ran at all. I sighed, turned up my collar, and stepped out from under the awning. The cold rain immediately went to work, soaking my hair, trickling down the back of my neck. I started walking toward the bus stop. The street was empty, just a few rare cars speeding past, splashing filthy water onto the sidewalk. And then, like an answer to my silent prayer, a yellow shape appeared in the distance. The car was moving slowly, unhurried, as if it was searching for someone. On its roof sat a little rectangular sign with flickering red letters, "Taxi." A wave of relief washed over me. Without thinking, I threw my arm up and stepped to the edge of the road. Its headlights blinded me for a second, but the car glided smoothly over and stopped, its old windshield wipers squeaking as they pushed water back and forth. The door opened with a hollow creak. "Well, good evening there." "Get in, beautiful, before you melt away," came a raspy voice from inside. "Where are we heading?" I practically jumped inside and slammed the door. The cabin was warm and stuffy, smelling of stale tobacco smoke, sweat, and something else. Something sweet and musty, like the basement of an old house. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that it was warm, it was dry, and this old clunker was going to get me home. God, what awful weather. "Thank you so much, you're a lifesaver." "Stroidley Street, Building 45, third entrance, please." The driver nodded and shifted gears. The car, an old Ford Crown Victoria the color of egg yolk, pulled away smoothly. In the dim light of the dashboard, I finally got a good look at him. A stocky, thick-set man around 50, with bushy black mustache and graying hair at his temples. Thick fingers adorned with heavy rings. When he turned to check his blind spot, I caught a glint of gold from several of his teeth. His smile was wide, almost welcoming. "Don't see many people out in this kind of weather," he said, turning his eyes back to the road. "You work around here?" "Yeah, at the bar," I replied shortly, trying not to breathe too deeply. The smell in the car was thick. It clung to you like a second skin. The driver shook his head. "Tough work. Lots of drunks. They bother you much?" "Sometimes," I said, staring out the window at the familiar streets gliding by. The rain outside had turned the world into a blurry watercolor painting. The streetlights stretched into yellow streaks, and shop windows bled together into pools of color. "Don't you worry, girl. I'll get you there fast." He grinned at me again in the rearview mirror. The car turned off the main street, heading toward my neighborhood. But instead of taking the usual route, we slipped into a maze of dark, unfamiliar alleyways. My stomach clenched almost immediately. I think this is the wrong way," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He waved a dismissive hand. "Traffic jam on the main road tonight. Road work. I know it's shortcut. Don't you worry about it." I nodded, but a knot of cold anxiety had already formed deep in my gut. I tried to shake it off. "It's just exhaustion." "The dark. Your imagination playing tricks on you." I forced myself to take a breath and looked back out the window. The world outside looked wrong. The buildings seemed to lose their sharp edges. Their outlines blurred like I was seeing them through a thick layer of filthy water or a fogged-up window. The familiar supermarket on the corner was hazy, shrouded in a kind of smoke. Its bright sign now glowed dim and sickly, like a dying star. "Cold back there, beautiful?" "I can turn up the heat," the driver offered. "No, I'm fine," I replied, though a shiver ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. I glanced at him secretly. He was swaying slightly with the motion of the car, his thick fingers drumming on the steering wheel. And then suddenly he went silent. Not just stopped talking, but completely silent. Even his heavy breathing seemed to vanish. The car was filled with a silence so deep it made my ears ring. All I could hear was the wind outside and the wet hiss of the tires on the asphalt. Without thinking, my eyes drifted up to the rearview mirror. In the mirror, in the darkness of the back seat, there were shapes. Vague and blurry, like shadows cast by a flickering flame. They sat completely still, staring straight ahead. But I could feel their eyes on me. A heavy, suffocating weight. Ice-cold terror clamped down on my body. I forced myself to turn my head. The back seat was empty, just my purse lying right where I'd left it. My heart slammed against my ribs. I whipped my head back to the mirror. They were still there. The same shapes, clearer now. It was like they were sitting right next to me, so close I could almost feel them, but in reality, there was nothing. One of the silhouettes had its neck twisted at an unnatural angle. Another seemed to be crying, its face buried in its hands. The third one just stared right back at me from that mirrored world, and where its eyes should have been, there was only emptiness. "You comfortable back there?" the taxi driver's voice suddenly asked. It sounded so close, like he was whispering right into my ear. I flinched violently, pressing myself against the door. What? "Are you comfortable?" he repeated, his gold-capped teeth glinting in another smile reflected in the mirror. It looked like a snarl. "Fine," I managed to whisper. "Good," he said. "We're almost there." But we didn't arrive. The minutes stretched, turning into what felt like hours. Hours that couldn't possibly exist. The road outside lost all familiar landmarks. Sometimes silhouettes of buildings flickered past, but they weren't the houses of my city. These were grim, gray structures with empty eye sockets for windows, with crooked roofs reaching up into a low, leaden sky. Sometimes figures stood by the roadside, completely motionless, turned toward the road. They seemed to watch the car pass with stares I couldn't see but could feel on my skin. "Where are we?" My voice cracked, sounding thin and foreign. "On the road, beautiful. Where else would we be?" the driver replied. He wasn't looking in the mirror anymore. He stared straight ahead. His face had turned to stone, motionless, stripped of that false friendliness. "I want to get out." "Stop, please." "Can't stop here, beautiful." "Not allowed. Lots of mean people out at night. Dangerous for a girl to be wandering alone." There wasn't a trace of ingratiation in his voice. Only the cold, metallic statement of fact. And the smile. That same gold smile. It was still frozen on his face, but now it looked like a painted mask. "Stop right now." I screamed, grabbing the door handle. The handle wouldn't budge. It felt like it had been welded shut. The driver slowly turned his head toward me. Not his body, just his head. It twisted at an impossible angle. His neck cracked loudly like dry twigs snapping. The sound echoed in my mind and instantly made me shrink back into the seat. "Shut up now." "Sit still," he said, and there was nothing left of his former kindly tone. "We'll be there soon." I recoiled, pressing my back against the door. Panic, sharp and uncontrollable, rose in my throat. Not knowing what else to do, I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to pull myself together. "Okay, Yulia, breathe. Just breathe. This is a nightmare. It's exhaustion. It's stress." I tried to comfort myself, but the cold of the seat seeping through my thin dress and coat, the smell of decay and dust growing stronger with every second, it was all horrifyingly real. This wasn't just a kidnapping. This was something else. Something wrong. I looked at the driver, at his thick hands resting on the steering wheel, and my gaze drifted downward. I saw his legs, or rather what should have been his legs. Where there should have been feet in cheap sneakers or boots, there was something else. Something dark, covered in short, bristly fur. And at the end, not feet, but hard, black, cloven hooves. They pressed against the pedals, and with each push, instead of a metallic scrape, there was a barely audible, hollow sound of bone striking bone. I blinked and stared again. Maybe I was imagining it. Reality was cruel. Holy shit, those are actually hooves. In that moment, the whole world flipped. It collapsed into a single point of freezing terror. All the strangeness, the blurry city, the shadows in the mirror, the endless road came together into one monstrous picture. This wasn't a taxi. This was a trap. I wasn't in a car with an eccentric driver. I was in a cage with something dark, something unholy. An icy hammer of realization struck my chest, knocking the last of the air from my lungs. My mind kept circling back to those massive goat hooves. An image from nightmares, from my grandmother's terrifying fairy tales, from stories about that force that prowls the edges of the world gathering lost souls. A taxi to nowhere. A taxi that picks up those who let their guard down and takes them until they're completely tormented. So that's what the silhouettes in the mirror were. Probably the souls of the people he'd already frightened to death. Suddenly, words flashed in my memory, bright as a lightning strike. My grandmother's voice. Quiet, but as clear as I remembered it from childhood. Grandma grew up in a remote village. She knew all the signs, all the charms, all the stories about the things that walk in this world besides people. She used to tell me these things, sitting in the kitchen over evening tea. "Remember, Yulenka," she'd say, "dark spirits are dangerous, but sometimes they're stupid. They live outside our time. If one latches onto you, if it won't let go, tell it. Come yesterday. It confuses them. They can't handle that paradox. They run away like they've been slapped." Back when I was 10, I'd laughed at that, imagining a forest demon or a swamp spirit scratching its head in confusion. What do you mean yesterday? Now, those words became the only lifeline in a raging, frozen sea of hopelessness. The car raced down an absolutely empty road, straight as an arrow, vanishing into black nothingness. On either side stretched a dead wasteland, littered with crooked, bare trees that looked more like the skeletons of giants. The taxi driver spoke again. His voice had returned to that almost human tone, but now it was laced with a sticky, unhealthy sweetness. "Are you enjoying the ride, beautiful?" he cooed. "We could see each other sometimes, you know. I could take you anywhere you wanted. Beautiful places. What do you say? Wouldn't that be nice?" He turned around. Actually turned around. His vertebrae cracked horribly as his neck stretched, becoming unnaturally long, thick with bulging veins. His smile stretched into a grotesque grin, pulling all the way to his ears, revealing not gold crowns anymore, but rows of tiny, sharp yellow teeth, like a fish's. And his face, it had changed too. The skin had become too smooth and white, stretched tight like parchment. His eyes small, deep-set glowed with a dull yellow light, like a night predator. Everything swam before my eyes. Nausea washed over me. Last chance. Pull yourself together. I clenched my fist so hard my nails dug into my palms. The sharp, real pain helped me gather the last shreds of my will. I straightened up, looked directly into those yellow eyes, and said clearly, enunciating each word just like Grandma taught me, "Come yesterday." The effect was instantaneous. The crafty smile slid off the taxi driver's face like a mask. His features twisted with genuine wild astonishment mixed with rage. He jerked his head sharply. More cracking sounds. "What did you say to me?" I felt my cheeks flush with surging adrenaline. A moment later, I repeated it louder, more firmly. His face contorted. It began to change completely, losing any last trace of human features. His skin darkened, covered in wrinkled cracks. His mustache shriveled, turning into tufts of bristly hair. And his eyes blazed with infernal crimson fire. A roar erupted from him. An inhuman roar, filled with such insane fury that the car windows trembled in their frames. The Crown Vic's engine roared to life, and the car lurched forward with such force that I was thrown back against my seat. The world outside the window blurred into a smeared streak of darkness. The vehicle swerved wildly from side to side, racing down a road that now twisted and looped like it was bending into unknown, alien dimensions. The smell of sulfur and burnt oil filled the cabin. The shadows in the back seat stirred, agitated, reaching toward me with their formless appendages, but they seemed afraid to get too close. The driver, now barely resembling anything human, sat gripping the wheel with long, bony fingers tipped with filthy claws. He muttered something, grinding his teeth, and in his muttering I heard curses in a language that doesn't exist. I pressed myself into the seat, repeating the words in my mind like a mantra. Come yesterday, come yesterday. I was terrified that if I stopped, even for a moment, I'd lose this fragile barrier of protection. And then a sharp, piercing screech of brakes. The car spun in place. The seatbelt I hadn't even noticed before slammed across my chest, pinning me down. We were standing at the exact same bus stop where I'd gotten in. The rain was still drizzling, lit by the same street lamp. The familiar sign of the Centaur bar was visible maybe 60 feet away. The passenger door clicked open. I didn't. Survival instinct launched me out of the car and onto the wet asphalt. I didn't look back. I didn't check for my purse. I just ran. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, feeling the cold air burn my lungs, my heart ready to explode from my chest. Only after I'd made it about 100 yards, tripping on a curb and nearly falling, did I dare to look back. The street was empty. No yellow Crown Vic. No tire tracks on the wet pavement. Just the rain quietly hissing on the rooftops and a lonely dog huddled in a doorway. I made it home on shaky legs. My hands trembled so badly that it took 3 tries to get the key in the lock. Once inside, I bolted the door with every lock I had. I put on the chain. I pushed a heavy chair against it. Then I turned on every light I could find and curled up in the corner of the couch, pulling a blanket over my head. My body shook with a fine, unrelenting tremor that didn't stop until morning. I didn't sleep. I listened to every sound in the apartment, the creak of the floorboards, the gurgle of water in the pipes. I kept expecting to see a flash of yellow outside the window, to see those red neon letters, taxi. But nothing happened. In the morning, when the first rays of sun painted the sky a pale pink, the trembling finally began to subside. I went to the window. The street was living its ordinary life. Cars drove by. People hurried to work. The world was sharp again. 3 days later, Andre came back. I couldn't help myself. He threw myself at him and sobbed, telling him some incoherent story about a taxi, the rain, and hooves. He listened, stroking my hair, saying it was just a nightmare, hallucinations from exhaustion. He convinced me to see a doctor, to take some mild sedatives. Gradually, the sharpness of the memories began to fade. I tried desperately to convince myself it was all delusion, to explain it away with simple, rational reasons. The darkness, the fatigue, an old car with weird pedals. Not right away, but the fear did recede, giving way to a vague unease. And then just ordinary anxiety. I needed that. Paranoia was no way to live. It choked you like an itchy wool scarf. But I don't walk in the dark anymore. And I almost never take taxis, only through app.